Get the right thing here. Okay.
Okay, it is running on YouTube now.
Okay. Including that switch computers, so maybe I'll get insurance for you back there. Okay, time. Looks like we got 9 people in the waiting room. I see that. That's good. Can't get my Zoom to move off the screen for some reason. Well, it's a good thing we've got a good radio voice, Charlie. We can't see that. That was me. That's just something around here, sorry. It's being all sorts of awkward. Well, I guess I can start letting people in. Right now, we see the premium slide. Oh, really? Yeah. Let me try something else. What is that doing there? So we're just gonna.
There you go.
Get this other document open. Alright, we're gonna look at the waiting room here. See if I can find it.
Want me to just read them all?
I'm probably gonna go by one, make sure there's a first and last name for each. Just so we know where people. Yeah, they look good to me. Let's start reading. It is 7 o'clock, everyone, we will kind of wait a minute or two just for some, last minute people that might be joining us. We'll obviously be admitting them, if they join late as well, but we just want to catch those few that might still be, logging in at 7. All right, well, folks logging in has kind of slowed down here, so I think we'll just go ahead and get started. Corey will be monitoring the wait room as we get started here and letting people in as we go. My name is Charlie Cull. I apologize. Just in the last hour, my video has stopped working, so you will not be able to see me, but that's fine. We'll be sharing our screen for the most, almost all the presentation today. Again, thank you for everyone joining us this evening here on Zoom and also via YouTube and Cat6, the local access channel. This presentation is being recorded, so it will be posted on carrollforward.com later tomorrow for viewing, along with the slides you'll be seeing today. Just kind of our typical Zoom protocols that you're all probably well familiar with. Do feel free to use the chat feature throughout.
to ask questions, provide comments. You can always chime in as well and stop us on a slide to ask a question via voice as well if you'd like to. We do have about a 30-minute presentation here and then some questions at the end for you to answer and then open discussion as well. And we hope you do have questions for us. Again, this will be posted afterwards and you can always submit your feedback as well at carrollforward.com. So we're going to jump right into it today. Like I said, my name is Charlie Carroll. I'm with RDG Planning and Design. My colleague Corey Scott, also from RDG, is on, and we've been working with the City of Carroll on the Corridor of Commerce Plan update. Mike Hoagie Weaver is on as well from the city, and we've been working with the local steering committee on this for the past several months, and we wanted to give you an update on kind of where we're at, some of the things we've heard from the community through our input process so far, and then show you some of the concepts we've been working on and get your reaction as we move forward. So for those that aren't familiar with the project or haven't visited carrollforward.com, at least the schedule page, because you had to visit it to be on the Zoom call, but we're in the February, March timeframe, obviously, and that indicates our refinement of some of the plan we've been working on. We'll be moving into March and April on kind of refining some of the things you see tonight based on the comments we hear and various other items we're working on with the steering committee. Targeting final draft plan later in March and early April. As we move into some of the things you'll see tonight, we just wanted to give you an update on what we've heard from the community survey that was put out last December, and what are some of the major themes that have been kind of unveiling as we've been working through this process. Just so you know, we did hold a series of listening sessions, small group discussions with folks back in December, familiar with the corridor and stakeholders in the corridor. Many of you are probably familiar of a survey that's been live on carrollforward.com. To date, we have 247 responses, and also an online map exercise where we've had a lot of ideas and very targeted suggestions submitted on that online map. These are still live, so you still can go on carrollforward.com and participate in those items as well. Excuse me. So here on your screen, you can see a variety of themes of what we've heard so far from the public. This is strictly the engagement we've heard throughout the process. I'll kind of go at least a high level one by one here. I'm going to get my annotation or pointer up here so I can better direct presentation here. So our first two here really rose to the top, and I think it's nothing new to most folks, is support for new businesses and a stronger mix of quality retail is a top priority for folks along the Highway 30 corridor in Carroll. Again, that was one of the main reasons for doing an update to from the development side, we've heard a lot of different things, but one thing that has rose kind of up as a common theme is mixing of uses. So this is mixing a variety of uses either on one site, perhaps in one building, from retail, office, recreation, and housing is really desirable over kind of single-use sites. Not surprising to us, but maybe surprising to some of you, is the desire we've heard from people about having a continuous pathway along the corridor. Really, on one side of the street is the priority. Two sides of the street did not garner as much support, but people really want to see those connections east-west and north-south from the corridor leading to different destinations throughout Carroll. We've got kind of a little bit of both sides of the types of improvements or things people want to see in the corridor. Some noted, keeping improvements simple, while some of our more detailed conversations really wanted us to think big and look towards major things that could really change the image of Carroll, which leads into kind of what is the corridor and what does it feel like coming into Carroll. People really want to see some consistency in the feeling driving along Highway 30, expanding entryways, not necessarily signage, but the feeling of kind of entering Carroll and that pleasant feeling of entering a new city. So those were, sorry, I was just taking a drink there. Those are some of the major themes, and now you'll see some ideas that kind of back up those themes we heard throughout the rest of the evening.
So here we work, and diving into the three themes of input and feedback that we're hearing from everyone's contributions. In short, it's three things. The first being experience, second being mobility, the third being development. So the first is enhancing the experience of Carroll, creating strong memories for all. This applies to people's impression of the community, sometimes immediate impression. They may be thinking, is Carroll a place they want to visit again, to work, to live, to open up their business? Do they find Carroll immediately attractive? So the memory of Highway 30 has significant influence on what people from Carroll, from Iowa, from elsewhere say about the community. So who will say things about Carroll? People coming through Carroll that may not necessarily see Carroll as their destination today. They can be coming through either by truck, or Carroll is just in between the two, their origin and their destination. People getting around by car. These are generally residents, employees, people who see Carroll as their destination. People getting around by walking or bicycling because they may not have access to a car or simply enjoy exercise. And so this all comes together in the second, which is creating options for moving safely between neighborhoods and destinations. People getting to work, to school, stores, the parks, or even a friend's place. So what can we do in this plan as a way to resolve barriers and identify safer paths for creating options for folks to get where they want to go? And finally, preparing scenarios for redevelopment to maximize the limited real estate along the corridor. Some sites are open right now, they're vacant. Other sites may be more long-term for redirection, yet we recognize that markets change, and through this plan, we can identify how we can get the most out of what we have for those sites. So I want to praise the city for being proactive rather than reactive to some of these things. When looking at the map, we've looked at the taxonomy of the corridor for the experience, mobility, and development patterns. We have three distinct areas with downtown in the middle. That's characterized with higher density of development and buildings built close to the street. The approach areas, which is on either end, has lower densities that is generally set back from the street with parking lots in front, sometimes with frontage roads in some areas. And the transition area has a blend of attributes that fit between both the downtown and the approach. And through some of the things that Charlie will be sharing, we'll show a little bit more of what that taxonomy is like. But part of the recommendations is kind of reinforcing this experience and making sure that when you arrive into the approach, you feel that you've arrived at Carroll. Let's see. With the walk, we've looked at all the streets. We've looked at the corridors, the gaps. What we try to do is just get a strong understanding of what are the things as far as possibilities for completing a full system. And then also, how can we improve the approaches to the business entrances for better accessibility? Our steering committee, we even did a walking tour of the entire corridor through the cold and snow to gain some more testimonial experiences. Through that, some images came to mind of some of these enhancements is intended to improve options for customers so they feel they belong at whatever speed they travel. And so the images on the left are just some subtle things that are near 4-lane road as far as separating the pedestrian from the road that have some level of comfort. The images on the right, again, 4-lane roads and how can we create options for better crossing. And then also when we have those businesses that are set back, how can we improve the experience of getting people from the sidewalk to the entrances of those buildings? So those are some of the things that we've been looking at. Charlie's gonna bring up a full concept here. And so,
yeah, we're just gonna get zoomed in here and take a little tour of the ideas. So we'll try to go slow so you can follow along on the screen, but we're gonna be going east to west and just talking about some of the how this looks on paper and implementation for some of these mobility ideas.
Yep, pedestrian oriented. The bigger dots, the orbs, represent signalized intersections. On the east end, we have some major employers. So the concept here identifies paths that can connect neighborhoods to employers and other businesses. Much of it's looking at access management from a vehicle standpoint, High Ridge Road, perhaps connecting to Highway 30 somehow, either directly or over to the east, to the road to the east. Extension of Plaza Drive in the event of redevelopment of the salvage yard and maybe some of the buildings that are closer to the street. Monterey Drive could have a line intersection that could offer access to future development south of Highway 30. And so thinking about that being an opportunity there. And then the trail that's running along Bella Vista Drive off to the east, seeing how that can turn into a walking path that follows Plaza Drive that links to the employers to the east and then crosses the street, then cycles back all the way over to Grant along the creek side. And so kind of creating a closed system there for some pedestrian options. And so when we're looking at Grant and Highway, they can choose to go east to either connect to the trail system, south to the trail crossing at Farland Clinic that will take them to Swan Lake, or west into downtown and neighborhoods. The parallel streets have a continuous path. So essentially that's where much of the recommendations are coming from the core. West. We've heard that the consultants should consider having a complete system. And so while some discussion, some of the dialogue that we've heard leans toward maybe deferring some of the walking paths west of 71, we need to have a plan that thinks about all these future connections in the future. So people have expressed interest in connecting the neighborhoods to Walmart. So when we scroll up a little bit to the north, if we, looking at the alignment of 18th Street, the service road that is west of Highway 71 there, the service road that's west of Highway 71 there, north of the hotel, that area, a little bit further north there, Charlie, the 18th Street alignment.
Right.
Yeah, that can continue all the way west over to Travel. And so as a steering committee, when we walk to some of these different destinations, particularly on the east end, where there was snow, you can see these goat paths. We understand that there's some paths that are already being taken. So how can we actually turn those into formalized paths? So on the south side of limit some of those conflict points, how can we create some continuous connections for those? So when doing corridor plans across the country, when we're looking at this, we're not looking at some magnificent changes, but there's some things that are some possibilities for just improving the overall experience for the people who are traveling around the community. So when we're looking at some of the graphic on the right just shows how in some places we've got a lot of different entry points into drives, but by actually consolidating some of these access points, we can actually increase the amount of parking. Even when you go over to Jimmy John's and look at that area, there's a possibility of consolidating some of those parking areas or those access points to increase the amount of parking. So just some subtle things that can be done to just improve the comfort of being along the street.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. And so the other part, kind of a functional element of the corridor is the development buildings, the uses along the corridor. So there are several opportunity sites we've identified through talking with our steering committee, looking at responses to the survey and the mapping exercise that we see as potential sites for change in the future. Now, almost all these sites are not owned by the city, so just kind of as we go through these slides, just understand these are very long-term ideas, thinking about voluntary transition of property ownership over time, or individual property owners redeveloping their sites could be changed in the change over time in the future to kind of enhance the corridor. Demand that we all know is present in Carroll as well. You'll start to see some of these types of ideas shown on some of these sites. So starting on the east side with what we call development site or opportunity site number 1 is pretty much a blank slate right now. It is a site just the fairway area, pretty much just farmland right now. It is restricted a little bit by floodplain in this site. So there is still some developable land though along Highway 30, and this could be a number of different things from commercial services, retail, even housing, perhaps a larger at some point in the future, and it could be a number of different things, but commercial focused is likely what would be we would recommend in this area. If we go across the street to the Fairway area, Corey had mentioned this site a lot in the mobility concept with some frontage roads and also bringing High Ridge Road south. So we've looked at this area as a potential in the future as an opportunity to change as property ownership changes or property owners decide to redevelop into something else. One idea when we look at that, and this is kind of sketchy for a reason, because we know it probably won't develop the drive extending through from the A Square Strip Center to the Fairway site, and then High Ridge Road extending from the neighborhood south as well. Commercial uses along Highway 30 being the priority, with potential extensions of new housing development as well from the neighborhoods to the north. So these could be really anything. Duplex is shown here with some small footprint multifamily as well. Another option for that site, just to show something a little, obviously a parking area as we get into that's landscaped and screened from trails and aesthetic purposes. The kind of the neighborhood concept remains on the north of it as an extension of High Ridge Road and continued extension of Plaza Drive in this option as well. So really just two options to illustrate what this, excuse me. As we move east, one of the sites that the public, we've heard a lot about from the public is this Grant Road intersection. Obviously it has a lot of significance being the main connection to and athletic facilities in Graham Park. The site where the Four Macy's used to be is obviously vacant right now, and a big opportunity for redevelopment or development in the near future potentially. Along Grant Road is to leave that intersection more of an open space, landscaped area, not a park or public use, but more or less for aesthetic purposes. Perhaps there's some sort of entryway feature or wayfinding, and then build any commercial development setback a little bit behind that here next to the existing Casey's. There are some utilities and where it used to be, so that does restrict some building, at least in size, on the site. So leaving it as a green space landscaped area prevents that, or I guess overcomes that obstacle. Corner edge of it, we have a series of buildings that a couple of them are currently for sale, but the pedestrian environment here isn't the greatest with the number of vehicles and access points. So one idea, if this were to ever change over ownership or different types of uses in the future, is still focusing on that landscaped edge and pedestrian access on Grant Road. Perhaps a commercial building or some sort of building here that retains a little bit of a buffer from Highway 30 for that kind of softening of the intersection. This does show a mixed use commercial residential buildings here. We see this as, one option. We also see this entire site as probably perhaps a more beneficial option of being a parking area. And obviously it would be a large concrete lot, but it would provide much need for the recreational facilities to the north and employers in the area as well for a need for parking. If we move on to our next site, we didn't draw out the parking area because it's not very exciting to draw a parking lot there. So if you can just imagine that as a parking area. But if we move west to the other side of downtown, we get to the West Street Highway 30 intersection. Today, this is the location of the Edward Jones office building and some residential uses on the rear of this half block, and then just kind of miscellaneous parking areas. One option for this site in the future, there's some underutilized on Highway 30 So a commercial building could either be built or expanded on this location. Edward Jones would remain in their existing building or potentially be a tenant in a new commercial space if that were the market were to support that. This option here shows continued rear, although the existing housing could easily remain, but if the site were to be redeveloped or bought for more intense development, this shows a series of houses, single unit houses and townhomes with interior parking on the rear of that site to support some of the housing demand in Carroll. We saw talking to our committee as an opportunity site. You see here is kind of we call it the Quint Avenue Triangle, but many of you are probably familiar with this area as far as the access management of driveways and navigating different businesses in this area. So one thing is important to note here is there are any changes here. Land assembly and property assembly as things turn over, but here's kind of a way to look at how this site could be more efficient from a transportation standpoint and parking standpoint as well. This vision here orients the building more towards the corner, does close one access drive off of Highway 30, but with interior here than there is today in this area. This could be a variety of different uses, mixed use office, commercial, even potentially some residential near the park on the back side. But important here to note is Solinger does remain open to access the traffic light on Quint Avenue. So lastly, sorry, whoa, cough in my throat here, but lastly, we wanted to move on to some of the imaging because that's something we did hear a lot about from the survey responses and also our listening sessions. How does it feel coming into Carroll on Highway 30? What are some things that can be done to make the entryways feel more cohesive as you transition to the newly completed, much of it newly completed streetscape in the downtown core? So really our focus is really defined on softening up a lot of the concrete areas with landscaping, trees, shrubbery, and then also adding some potentially some more structural elements, pulling some of those downtown elements into the approach and transition areas, into a community that doesn't necessarily equate to a sign, but more aesthetic items. And what we've been drafting up so far with really, like I said, focused on about a 75% natural element, 25% built element as far as enhancements are concerned. So these are things like I said, softening up if driveways are consolidated for access management and paths and we're continuing to make add sidewalks in the corridor for continuous pathways. Incorporating some landscaping and greenery with those projects to shield parking or just provide a little bit of buffer from different concrete uses. You can see here also some of the built environment features that are possible. These are strictly ideas right now, things we're throwing out there for reaction. Rather than just putting traditional light poles, perhaps you pull some elements from the downtown area design with some of the grading and different things into some vertical elements. These could also act as lighting, a light pole per se, be lighted from the bottom or top, and kind of spread throughout the corridor. Not necessarily a lot of them, but every so often, so you get the feeling of a corridor or you're approaching or you're entering into Carroll. And these will be primarily in the approach areas and then transition off as you get into the more dense with good shrubbery, good landscaping, but there are areas that don't have as much landscaping where those are opportunities to incorporate some vegetation. Other built environment features would be things like benches or trash receptacles on our more heavily traveled areas. For example, the Grant Road intersection where we may see increased traffic to go north to Graham Park and The rec facilities, if trails, especially at South on Grant Road, are put in. So there's areas to incorporate those and sort of lead out what's happened in downtown to the transition area to a lesser extent. And then, of course, downtown, there's been a lot of great work already complete downtown, and those elements obviously will remain and continue to function downtown, and those kit parts is what we're calling them, continue to be established and will need to be maintained over time. And lastly, the time, and something that can really be another element to create a brand or theme for a corridor. So this is important not just to tell people where to go and how to get to places, but it can be geared to both vehicles and pedestrian scale, and need to be strategic along the corridor to direct people to certain destinations. Obviously, things like Grant Road, some of the improvements we've recommended there will kind of be a natural entryway to turn north and welcome people to the rec facilities, but a sign would be needed there as well, or slightly before there to direct people. And the consistent theme is important, as you can see here. This example, there's sort of a family of elements in those wayfinding items. So that we have a few questions for you, for those that are on the Zoom, but we wanted to just kind of circle back to our next steps. I know that was a lot of information to take in, and we'll be obviously posting this for review as well, but we'll be moving into March in April and creating an action strategy and phasing these items into, or whatever the final items are, into a phased approach for the city and its partners to pursue, as well as a draft document for your review, be posted on the website and then presented at a public open house as well, which will be to be announced date later in April. And so how does that translate from what we saw today? Excuse me. You can see, obviously you saw a lot of sketchy type drawings today. As we're refining concepts, those will be fine-tuned based on the input we hear, and kind of transitioned into a final document to, and you can see kind of how those will evolve over the next month or so, a published document. So that was kind of the bulk of material we had to share with everyone tonight. I didn't see any chats pop up, so maybe I'll jump to our poll questions first, and then we can circle back and have open discussion if anyone has it. So this is for, excuse me, I keep getting something in my throat. For those on the Zoom call, you will see a poll pop up here shortly. And I know we're asking this question without you having much time to digest what you've seen, but we would like to get first pulse reactions here. So give me a second here to launch this poll. And what we're asking is, which opportunity site is the highest priority for the future? And this could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is a single choice option. So I'm gonna launch that here and see if we start getting responses pulled in, and then I'll share the results when after a few seconds here, to let people respond. And Corey and I have a feeling what we will respond, excuse me, and so far it seems to be agreeing with us. We have about 56% have voted so far. Give it another 30 seconds. Well, it looks like that's kind of stalled out. 75% response rate, not great. All right, we'll end polling here. And share results. So you should be seeing results on your screen right now, hopefully. And looks like, and this is what Corey and I felt as well, is the site southeast of Grant Road next to Casey's. And we tend to agree. A lot of opportunity on that site, obviously being vacant right now. Obviously means that it's going to develop, will develop at some time likely. So we tend to agree. So what was number 2 here? Number 2 was, we had a tie, although only 4 responses for both of these. Northeast Grant Road and then the Quint Avenue Triangle. So those are both definitely longer term possibilities, but nice to see those responses. Then Fairway was a close third, although only, we'll have 3 responses there. So, all right, good to know. I'm gonna take a screenshot of this, or maybe Corey, do you want to take a screenshot of yours before I close it here? I'm not sure if Zoom saves these.
And
All right. So question 2 relates to some of the aesthetic items we ended the presentation with. So here we're asking, what level of aesthetic improvements do you think the corridor needs today? Series of options, major enhancements. We've got a series of images here. You can see are more, they include landscaping, but also a perhaps more mix of built features like signs and light poles and even entryway features. Minor enhancements, which is, you can see there is more of the landscaping treatments, shrubbery and more muted improvements, or do nothing, which is always an option to kind of give a pulse on how people are feeling. So we're gonna launch this here. Let me get it pulled up, hopefully. And so we have an option in between actually as well. So you can say major, or you can say between major and minor. So somewhere in between. Oh, we have better response already. Give it another 30 seconds. All right, looks like we've sort of topped out here. 87% response rate, so better than last time. In polling, share results. So it looks like the pretty clear vote here from this group is somewhere in between major and minor. And I would say that kind of mirrors what we've heard throughout our discussions with folks so far too, and kind of what, really what you saw tonight as well, with the 75 kind of the approach areas being more of these minor, 75% natural areas, and then getting a little bit more into the major stuff when we get into the transition areas, or even a little bit of the major mixed with the minor and approach areas as well. So interesting response. We did have 15% say no enhancements, and I would say that echoes some of what we've heard as well. People liking things how they are too. So interesting results. I'm gonna stop sharing here. Stop sharing results anyway. And then I'm gonna jump back up to this slide. So in light of the 2 questions, or really anything you heard tonight, does anyone have any questions, comments, things they'd like to ask about? Looks like we have a raised hand here from Dan. Feel free to unmute.
Yeah, so I got a question. It seems like this corridor is going to build businesses in town, which is fine. I just kind of curious where the people are going to come from to work at these businesses. I know it seems like a lot of restaurants and stuff are shorthanded as it is now. And I'm assuming that taxes are probably going to go up as this grows. So where these people are going to live is another question. Is there any plans to improve or the student housing for DMAC or something like that in order to get some more college kids in the area to live and work in some of these places?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. That's something we've heard throughout as well, and it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. This plan is part of this plan is about growing the population and obviously making Carroll attractive to more people to move here. But yes, we have heard about the desire for student dormitories and such, and so we've anticipated that if that does happen, there's some of the housing opportunities we've identified in the corridor could fit that site potentially, or other sites as well. So growing the pocket, hence why we kind of included a lot of, not a lot, but some housing opportunities in a lot of these sites as well. Because we know the extreme, Carroll just actually not too long ago did a housing study, and there's a high housing need in Carroll, and providing some of that would allow options for people to move into the market and find options and grow the population as well. I don't know, Corey, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, as we're thinking about a corridor, we think about the road and the properties that are adjacent to it. And so while that is kind of like the objective plan, we recognize there's all these other things that influence the corridor and how the corridor influences other areas. And so most of the effort has been focused on just the immediate road and the properties adjacent to it, although we have kind of done a little bit of scope creep and explored things beyond that. But housing is an important thing. It is very important to all Iowa communities. And part of that is creating settings where builders want to come and build. And so if they feel that there's an increased demand in the future for housing, they're gonna, and particularly with the coupled with commercial development, it makes Carroll more attractive for thinking about the future.
Dan, this is Mike Poggeweaver. I just going to interject too. Housing certainly is an important thing, and it's an element that, in my tenure here, that has become probably more acute and not less acute, which gets concerning. I know about 4 years ago when I first moved here, it was a pretty pressing issue. The Carroll Area Development Corporation had just finished the countywide housing study. And at that time, when I moved here, I'm going to anecdotally say there was about 60 houses available. Talking to realtors actually today, there are only 10 houses on the market right now. And I talked to a business owner looking to bring a professional network engineer to our community. They've hired the individual, but they can't find housing. So it is an acute need. And, the city recognizes that. In fact, we have a meeting with some stakeholders this week to discuss that. And I think the city is looking hard at, is there an additional role for the city to look at housing, and how do we help that? We don't want to replace the private sector and the developers we have in our community that have been doing a really good job over the years. But I think there is some stresses that the city needs to look at and be part of that solution. So certainly if there's ideas on that, we're all ears right now.
It looks like we have a hand raised, Tom and Pat. Feel free to unmute if you'd like to ask a question or comment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, my question in these development areas that you identified, would you be proposing that the city try to purchase those properties without the use of eminent domain and then resell them to developers with some of the thoughts that you have in mind as to those types of developments that you'd like to have done? It seems to me that would be more proactive and get the job done sooner rather than waiting for some of these to be sold by by people who are going out of business, for instance, or something of that nature. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. We definitely are not recommending, and this is not the city's policy to acquire property by eminent domain, which you didn't allude to. But just to make that clear, that's not anything recommended in this plan. But certainly, there are certain sites where, for example, if the city sees, and I can let Mike chime in too, but a couple of properties for sale that are on one of these sites, it certainly would, behoove the city, if they have a separate fund set up to, and they wanted to be proactive, to certainly acquire some sites and set up development RFPs or such. Is certainly an option. It wouldn't be able to happen for all the sites. Just the capacity to do that is probably not likely, but definitely not out of the realm of possibility or recommendation for this plan. Mike, did you want to chime in at all?
Yeah, I want to echo the comment that, the city's not looking to do any eminent domain. That's not why we engaged the services of RDG to look at these plans, but really, in a lot of cases, it's trying to think outside the box, provide some ideas to kind of that private development, private investment that can go into these areas. Certainly, as there's opportunity and kind of the financial ability of the city, we may look at doing some land assembly where we voluntarily work with property owners to try to acquire sites when the timing and ability works. And bring those sites together to do some redevelopment opportunities. So I think that's definitely in the cards. But again, just the number of sites and throughout the community, I think it is going to be a long-term process. And certainly one of the next steps I know the steering committee is working on is on all of these items is kind of what is those short-term, medium-term, and long-term items and timing we want to take on each of these types of projects, being the trails, kind of the wayfinding to the redevelopment. So there's certainly, it's going to be a very phased plan. Certainly the city wants to take and do some immediate things to make some changes. So I think you'll see some projects within the next few years take shape and move forward. But some of these are going to be just very long-term. They're 10, 20-year projects to get going and to complete. But we also want that immediate hit the ground and see some changes. So as hopefully we're attracting some retail components to the city of Carroll, that they find us an attractive community to be part of and see some good growth opportunities for them in our community.
Thanks, Mike. Let's see here. I don't see any other hand raised. I see, no other hand raised. Anyone else? Questions, comments?
This is Mike from the city. You don't have to give us positive comments either. We want to hear all those comments.
And too, if just to kind of reiterate what we said at the beginning, if you're free to submit comments through the website, or if there's contact information on the website too. If you're not, if you want to give more confidential comments, that's perfectly fine as well. Just so you know, there's those mediums on carrollforward.com as well. All right. Well, we will stick around as long as we need to. But just want to say thank you again to everyone attending, and for those watching on other platforms, thank you for tuning in as well. Just a reminder, these will be posted tomorrow or later in the day to the website. But again, look out for our invitation and ideas to be posted leading up to the public open house, which will be announced here later this spring. But again, thanks for joining. We'll stick around if anyone wants to stick around and ask more questions, but otherwise, have a good evening and thanks for joining us.
Thank you all.
video's still not clicking on.
I was going to ask you that, Charlie.
Yeah, it's just like an hour ago, when my meeting right before this, I don't know, bumped out. I see my computer needs to do an update, so I don't know if it's related to that. But you never know how long those updates will take, so I refrain from starting here. Well, for those that are still on, we'll stick on for a few more minutes. I'm not sure if these are folks that are at their computers or not, but we'll stick around for a couple more minutes and then we'll probably sign off. All right, well, not hearing any other comments, I think we are going to sign off. Corey, Mike, we'll talk to you guys later.
Sounds
Good
good.
evening.
Thank you.